Welcome to the Edu Matrix channel. In this video, we will discover the history of the Vietnam Dong. We will explore Vietnam's early history defined by its origins in mythology and its long period under Chinese domination, which lasted from 111 BCE to 938 CE. This period had a profound influence on Vietnamese culture, politics, and economics. After regaining independence from China, Vietnam developed under various dynasties such as the Le, Tran, and Le, with an economy based on agriculture, particularly rice farming. The state maintained a tributary relationship with China, impacting economic systems and trade. During this period, currency was mostly based on barter, and coins introduced by the Chinese were used in limited scope for trade and taxation. Early Vietnamese states minted their own copper coins during independent periods. The French colonization of Vietnam, which began in 1858, dramatically changed the political and economic landscape. French authorities restructured Vietnam's economy to serve colonial interests, focusing on exporting agricultural products like rice, rubber, and coal. Infrastructure development, such as railways and ports, primarily served the French economy, but it laid the groundwork for Vietnam's modernization. Nationalist movements emerged, notably under leaders like Ho Chi Minh, leading to resistance against French rule. The French Indochinese piastre, introduced by the French, became the standard currency in Vietnam and was tied to the French colonial economy. The shift to a colonial export economy displaced traditional economic structures, leading to widespread inequality and economic discontent. During World War II, Vietnam was occupied by Japan, leading to severe economic hardship, including a devastating famine in 1945 that killed over 1 million people. The period after the war saw the rise of the Viet Minh, led by Ho Chi Minh, which sought independence from both Japanese and French colonial rule. The First Indochina War, which lasted from 1946 to 1954, broke out between the Viet Minh and the French, culminating in the French defeat at Dien Bien Phu and the Geneva Accords, which temporarily divided Vietnam into North and South. The Indochinese piastre remained the official currency, but its value fluctuated due to wartime inflation. Economic devastation during the war, compounded by the collapse of agricultural production and trade, severely impacted the economy, leading to widespread poverty. The Geneva Accords divided Vietnam into Communist North Vietnam and anti-Communist South Vietnam, each with its own economic systems. The North followed a socialist model with centralized planning and collective agriculture, while the South adopted a capitalist system, heavily reliant on U.S. financial aid. The Vietnam War, which lasted from 1955 to 1975, between the North, supported by China and the Soviet Union, and the South, supported by the U.S., ravaged the country. The war ended with the fall of Saigon in 1975, leading to the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. The North Vietnamese dong, introduced in 1946 and pegged to the Soviet ruble, reflected a centrally planned economy. The South retained the piastre until 1953, when the dong was introduced, pegged to the US dollar. Both North and South experienced inflation and currency depreciation due to the costs of the war. The South's economy was more destabilized by reliance on foreign aid, while the North's economy suffered from centralization and lack of resources. Reunified Vietnam 1976 to present. Economic challenges after the war. Following reunification in 1976, Vietnam faced severe economic challenges. The war had devastated infrastructure, agriculture, and industry. Vietnam adopted a centrally planned economy, attempting to integrate the North and South, but the transition was difficult. International isolation, especially from the US and its allies, further complicated recovery efforts. The Unified Vietnamese Dong, or VND, was introduced in 1978 to replace both the North and South Dong. However, post-war economic mismanagement led to hyperinflation and economic stagnation throughout the 1970s and early 1980s. In 1986, the Vietnamese government introduced the Doi Moi reforms, shifting the country from a centrally planned economy to a socialist-oriented market economy. These reforms encouraged foreign investment, loosened state control over the economy, and promoted private enterprise. Since then, Vietnam has experienced significant economic growth, transitioning from an agrarian economy to a manufacturing and export powerhouse, particularly in electronics, textiles, and agriculture. The Vietnamese dong stabilized with the Doi Moi reforms, although inflation remained an issue. Currency exchange rates became more flexible, and the government implemented policies to stabilize the banking system. The economy diversified, with manufacturing, services, and exports becoming key sectors. Vietnam's economy grew rapidly in the 1990s and early 2000s, becoming one of the fastest-growing economies in Southeast Asia. This growth has been driven by exports, foreign direct investment, and a young, increasingly educated workforce. Vietnam's accession to the World Trade Organization in 2007 further integrated it into the global economy. The country is now a leading exporter of electronics, textiles, coffee, and rice. The Vietnamese dong remains stable, though inflation and devaluation are ongoing challenges. The government and the State Bank of Vietnam have made efforts to control inflation and strengthen monetary policies. The use of US dollars for large transactions is common in Vietnam, reflecting confidence in the dollar's stability over the dong. Today, Vietnam is considered a middle-income country, with a strong manufacturing sector and a growing technology industry. The government continues to pursue economic reforms to attract foreign investment and improve infrastructure. Vietnam's strategic location and participation in trade agreements such as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership position it well for future growth. The Vietnamese dong remains the official currency, with the government closely managing exchange rates and inflation. Vietnam faces challenges such as rising labor costs, environmental sustainability, and maintaining economic growth amid global economic fluctuations. The COVID-19 pandemic temporarily slowed growth, but recovery efforts have been strong. Vietnam's history, from ancient times to the present, is marked by periods of foreign domination, war, and rebuilding. Despite these challenges, Vietnam has emerged as a dynamic and rapidly growing economy. Currency and economic policy have evolved significantly over time, reflecting the country's transition from a traditional agrarian society to a modern industrial economy. Today, Vietnam is poised for continued growth, with a stable currency and a diversified economy that is increasingly integrated into the global market. Trading the VND can be an exciting opportunity for beginners to enter the forex market. However, it is essential to understand the unique characteristics and factors that influence the Vietnamese dong's value. We hope this historical financial documentary on Vietnam provides insight into the VND.